Commander Vexthai stood before the massive star map in his flagship's command center. His tall, blue-skinned form cast long shadows across the holographic display, showing thousands of conquered worlds. Each planet glowed with a different color based on its classification level. Green dots marked Class 1 through 5 worlds, primitive places where beings still fought with sticks and stones. Yellow showed Class 6 through 10 civilizations that had barely figured out space travel. Red indicated Class 11 through 14 worlds, the real challenges that required careful planning and significant military force. But there was another color on the map. Gray dots scattered throughout the galaxy marked Class 15 worlds. These were what the Zephyrian Empire called mortal realms, planets inhabited by short-lived species that never amounted to much. Vexthai had conquered dozens of these worlds during his 3,000-year military career. They were always the same story. Beings who lived less than 100 years simply could not build anything lasting or impressive. They fought among themselves constantly, never unified, never truly advanced. "Sir, we are approaching the Sol system," announced his communications officer Krelnox. The younger Zephyrian had only lived for 800 years and still showed enthusiasm for what he considered exciting missions. Vexthai remembered being that young and eager once. "Display the target world," Vexthai commanded. The hologram shifted to show a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. The world called Earth appeared peaceful from this distance, but Vexthai knew better than to judge by appearances. His intelligence reports painted a picture of a typically chaotic mortal realm. The dominant species called themselves humans, and they were divided into nearly 200 different nations that constantly fought each other. Their technology was scattered and uneven. Some regions had advanced computer networks while others still used primitive farming methods. "What is our estimated time for pacification?" asked Krelnox. Vexthai studied the tactical analysis flowing across his screen. "Standard estimates for a Class 15 world suggest 3 to 4 cycles. Perhaps less if they surrender quickly once they see our superiority." The flagship's science officer, an ancient Zephyrian named Mordek, who had lived for nearly 5,000 years, approached the command platform. His weathered face showed the kind of wisdom that only came with extreme age. "Commander, I have completed the full analysis of this mortal realm. The results are quite typical. Proceed with your report," Vexthai said. Mordek activated his personal display unit. "The humans live an average of only 80 years. Their governments change constantly, some every 4 years, others through violent revolutions. They have over 6,000 different languages and cannot even agree on basic measurements or calendar systems. Their military technology is primitive but numerous. They seem particularly fond of explosive devices and projectile weapons." "Projectile weapons?" Krelnox laughed. "They still throw pieces of metal at each other?" "Essentially, yes," Mordek continued, "though they have refined the process somewhat. They also possess nuclear weapons, but these are crude fusion devices that would barely scratch our shields. Most importantly, their entire recorded history spans less than 10,000 years. For perspective, Commander, you have personally lived through nearly 1/3 of their total documented civilization." Vexthai nodded thoughtfully. This information matched every other Class 15 world he had conquered. Short lives led to short-term thinking. These humans probably could not imagine planning anything beyond their own brief lifespans. How could they possibly mount any meaningful resistance against an empire that thought in terms of millennia? "What about their space capabilities?" Vexthai asked. "Minimal," Mordek replied. "They have sent a few primitive vessels to their nearest planetary neighbor and established some basic orbital stations. Their fastest ships would take them thousands of years to reach even the closest star. They are completely trapped in their own system." The tactical officer, Zarlin, stepped forward with additional data. "Sir, our scouts report that Earth's defensive capabilities are concentrated in approximately 12 major military powers. Their weapons are mostly based on chemical explosives and simple energy weapons. They have no energy shields, no faster-than-light communication, and no experience fighting in space." Vexthai reviewed the fleet composition surrounding his flagship. 200 vessels of various sizes floated in perfect formation, their dark hulls nearly invisible against the starfield. Each ship represented technology developed over thousands of years by a species that had conquered half the galaxy. His smallest frigates could probably defeat this entire human civilization single-handedly. "Standard invasion protocol," he announced to his command staff. We begin with orbital bombardment of major military installations. Once their capacity for organized resistance is eliminated, we proceed with ground operations to secure key population centers. I expect formal surrender within 2 cycles. What about civilian casualties? Asked Krelnox. Minimize them where possible, but do not let humanitarian concerns delay the operation. Experience shows that mortal species respond better to decisive action than prolonged negotiation. They lack the patience for extended diplomatic processes. Vexthai turned back to the star map, mentally adding another gray dot to his personal tally of conquered worlds. Earth would be his 63rd Class 15 victory. After this, High Command had promised him a promotion to Admiral and command of an entire sector. His military career was progressing exactly as planned. "Sir," called the navigation officer, "we will reach optimal bombardment position in 6 hours. Excellent. Begin charging the main batteries and prepare invasion shuttles. All department heads, submit final readiness reports within the hour." Vexthai looked once more at the small blue world growing larger on their screens. "Gentlemen, in 3 days, this planet will be another productive member of the Zephyrian Empire. The humans will thank us eventually for bringing them into civilized galactic society." As the command staff dispersed to prepare for battle, Vexthai remained alone with the star map. He thought about his ancestors who had first developed the classification system used throughout the Empire. It was elegant in its simplicity. Species were ranked based on their technological achievements, political unity, and military capability. Class 15 represented the bottom tier, worlds where the inhabitants were too short-lived and chaotic to achieve anything significant. The system had never failed. In over 50,000 years of galactic expansion, every prediction had proven accurate. Every invasion had proceeded according to established timelines. There was no reason to expect this Earth to be any different from the dozens of other mortal realms he had conquered. Vexthai smiled slightly as he watched his fleet arrange itself for the coming assault. Soon, another primitive species would learn the benefits of joining a truly advanced civilization. The humans would discover what real technology looked like. Their petty national conflicts would end as they united under Zephyrian rule. Their brief lives would finally have purpose as they contributed to something greater than their limited imaginations could conceive. It would be, he reflected, almost merciful to save them from their own chaotic nature. The classification system had determined their fate long before his fleet arrived. Class 15 worlds were always the same story, and this story always ended with the same result. Victory was simply a matter of following established procedures and waiting for the inevitable surrender. The first plasma beam struck Earth at exactly 800 Galactic Standard Time. Vexthai watched from his command center as brilliant flashes lit up the planet's surface. Military bases across 12 major nations vanished in seconds, their primitive defensive systems offering no resistance to Zephyrian technology. The Pentagon, the Kremlin's military complex, and dozens of other strategic targets simply ceased to exist. "Initial bombardment complete, sir," reported Tsar Lin. "All major military command centers have been neutralized. Estimated human military capability reduced by 75%. Vexthai nodded with satisfaction. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. According to the handbook for Class 15 invasions, the humans should be broadcasting surrender signals within hours. Their governments would realize the hopelessness of resistance and seek terms for peaceful submission. Instead, something unexpected happened. The first sign came from Mordek at the science station. "Commander, I am detecting massive increases in electromagnetic communications across the planet. Their information networks are experiencing unprecedented activity levels." "Panic communications," Vexthai replied. "Standard response. Monitor for surrender signals," but Krelnox was frowning at his communication console. "Sir, these signals do not match standard panic patterns. The humans appear to be sharing technical data at extremely high rates. They are transmitting detailed scans of our weapon signatures to facilities across their planet." Vexthai moved to examine the data himself. The communications traffic was indeed unusual. Instead of the chaotic fear responses typical of newly conquered worlds, Earth's networks showed coordinated information sharing on a scale he had never seen. Every nation on the planet was receiving detailed technical analysis of Zephyrian weapons within minutes of the first strike. "How are they analyzing our technology so quickly?" Vexthai asked Mordek. "Unknown, sir. Their computer networks appear more sophisticated than our initial estimates suggested. They are also connecting their military systems in ways that should be impossible, given their political divisions. 3 hours after the bombardment, the first human response arrived. It was not a surrender message. Instead, crude missiles launched from hidden positions around the globe, targeting Zephyrian ships with surprising accuracy. The weapons were primitive and harmless against Zephyrian shields, but their guidance systems showed detailed knowledge of alien ship movements and weak points. "How do they know our ship configurations?" demanded Zarlin. Vexthai was beginning to feel the first stirrings of concern. In his 3,000 years of experience, no Class 15 world had ever responded to invasion with coordinated technical analysis. These humans were behaving unlike any mortal species in recorded history. The situation grew stranger over the following days. Human salvage teams appeared at every crash site within hours, often before Zephyrian recovery crews could reach their own damaged vessels. These teams worked with mechanical precision, stripping alien technology and disappearing into hidden facilities faster than pursuit ships could track them. "Sir," reported Krelnox on the 4th day, "we have lost contact with scout ship Veltar. Last transmission indicated they were investigating a human salvage operation. Send a recovery team," Vexthai ordered. The recovery team found the scout ship intact but empty. Security recordings showed human soldiers using modified Zephyrian stun weapons to capture the crew alive. The humans had reverse-engineered alien technology in less than 4 days and used it to take prisoners for interrogation. Mordek's analysis of the incident was deeply troubling. "Commander, the humans have demonstrated technical learning capabilities far exceeding Class 15 specifications. They are adapting to our technology at rates we typically see only in Class 12 or 13 civilizations." "That's impossible," Vexthai replied. "The classification system accounts for learning capacity. Mortal species lack the time necessary to develop advanced technical skills. Perhaps we need to reconsider our assumptions about mortal species," Mordek suggested carefully. Vexthai rejected this idea immediately. The classification system had been tested across thousands of worlds for 50,000 years. It could not be fundamentally wrong about something as basic as the capabilities of short-lived species. But the evidence continued to contradict his expectations. Human resistance grew stronger each day instead of weaker. Their attacks became more sophisticated, incorporating captured Zephyrian technology with impressive speed. Most disturbing of all, they showed no signs of seeking surrender or negotiation. On the 7th day, human fighters appeared in orbital space using jury-rigged fusion engines attached to their primitive spacecraft. The ships were ungainly and obviously dangerous to their own crews, but they moved with reckless speed that caught Zephyrian pilots off guard. 3 human kamikaze attacks succeeded in damaging frigate-class vessels before being destroyed. "Sir," Zarlin reported after reviewing combat recordings, "the human pilots made no attempt to preserve their own lives. They flew directly into our ships knowing they would die in the explosion." "Desperation," Vexthai explained. "Mortal species sometimes resort to suicide attacks when facing overwhelming force." But Krelnox disagreed. "Sir, communication intercepts suggest these were planned tactical operations. The human pilots volunteered for suicide missions as part of larger strategic objectives. They appear to view their short lifespans as acceptable costs for military advantage. This concept was completely alien to Zephyrian thinking. A being who could live for thousands of years would never voluntarily sacrifice their vast future for temporary tactical gains. The idea of treating death as an acceptable military option was so foreign that Vexthai struggled to understand the strategic implications. 2 weeks into the invasion, Vexthai was forced to admit that Earth was not responding like any Class 15 world in his experience. Human resistance was not decreasing. Instead, it was evolving with frightening speed. Their weapons improved daily as they incorporated more captured alien technology. Their tactics adapted to counter every Zephyrian strategy within hours of its implementation. Most importantly, their unity was increasing rather than fragmenting. The political divisions that had initially seemed like obvious weaknesses were disappearing as human nations coordinated their responses with unprecedented efficiency. Ancient enemies were sharing resources and intelligence to fight the alien invasion. "Sir," Mordek announced during the morning briefing, "I have completed analysis of human coordination capabilities. Their information networks allow them to share technical innovations across the entire planet within hours. A breakthrough achieved by scientists in one nation becomes available to researchers everywhere almost immediately. How is that possible? Vexthai asked. Their computer networks are more advanced than we initially recognized. More importantly, their decision-making processes are fundamentally different from long-lived species. They make rapid choices based on limited information rather than extensive analysis. This allows them to adapt faster than our strategic models predicted. Vexthai stared at the tactical displays showing Earth's increasingly effective resistance. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to doubt the reliability of the classification system that had guided Zephyrian expansion for millennia. These humans were not behaving like mortals. They were acting like something entirely new. 3 weeks into what should have been a simple pacification mission, Commander Vexthai found himself facing a crisis unlike anything in his military training. The humans of Earth continued to resist with increasing effectiveness, turning their supposed weaknesses into incomprehensible advantages. As he studied the latest battle reports, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. "Sir," reported Krell from his communications station, "we have intercepted human military communications from their underground command centers. They are making strategic decisions at a rate that our computers cannot fully analyze." Vexthai moved to examine the data streams flowing across multiple screens. Human military leaders were issuing orders, changing tactics, and implementing new strategies several times each day. In contrast, Zephyrian command protocols required extensive consultation with superior officers for any significant tactical changes. Decisions that would take the Empire weeks to approve were being made by human commanders in mere hours. How can they make effective decisions so quickly? Vexthai wondered aloud. Mordek, the ancient science officer, had been studying this question for days. "Commander, I believe we have made a fundamental error in our understanding of mortal species psychology. We assumed that brief lifespans would limit their capabilities, but the opposite appears to be true." "Explain." "Consider the perspective of a being who lives only 80 years, Mordek continued. "Every decision must be made quickly because there is no time for extended deliberation. They cannot afford to spend decades analyzing options as we do. This forces them to develop rapid decision-making skills that we have never needed to master." Vexthai considered this explanation while reviewing casualty reports. Human losses were enormous by any reasonable standard. They had already sacrificed more lives in 3 weeks than the Empire had lost in the past century of expansion. Yet instead of weakening their resolve, each death seemed to increase their determination to fight. The tactical officer Zarlin approached with another puzzling report. "Sir, we have analyzed human military leadership structure and found something remarkable. Their field commanders have authority to make independent decisions without consulting higher headquarters. Some human officers are authorizing major operations based solely on their personal judgment." "That's impossible," Vexthai replied. "No rational military system would allow individual officers such independence. The risk of catastrophic errors would be unacceptable. Yet it appears to be working for them," Zarlin continued. "Their forces respond to changing battlefield conditions faster than our computers can track. While we are transmitting requests for tactical guidance to Fleet Command, human units are already implementing new strategies." Vexthai was beginning to understand the magnitude of the Empire's miscalculation. Zephyrian military doctrine was based on careful planning, extensive consultation, and gradual implementation of well-tested strategies. These approaches worked well for a species that had thousands of years to perfect their methods. But against an enemy that could adapt within hours rather than centuries, traditional Zephyrian advantages became crippling disadvantages. The revelation came during a failed attempt to capture a human military facility. Zephyrian forces had surrounded an underground bunker complex and demanded surrender. Instead of capitulating, the human commander had immediately ordered the destruction of the facility rather than allow alien forces to capture valuable equipment and intelligence. The entire base was obliterated along with its defenders within minutes of the surrender demand. "Sir," reported the assault team leader. The human commander did not even attempt negotiation. When faced with certain defeat, they chose immediate destruction over any possibility of capture. Vexthai was appalled by this waste of life and resources. Any Zephyrian commander would have explored options for honorable surrender or prisoner exchange. The idea of choosing death over the possibility of eventual freedom was completely irrational from an immortal perspective. But Mordek offered a different interpretation. Commander, perhaps this is rational behavior for a mortal species. If the human commander expected to live only a few more decades anyway, the choice between death now or death after a life of captivity represents a much smaller sacrifice than it would for us. This insight forced Vexthai to reconsider every aspect of human behavior. Their willingness to attempt dangerous experimental technologies made sense if they had limited time to perfect safe alternatives. Their rapid decision-making was logical if delay meant missing opportunities that might not arise again in their brief lifetimes. Even their fragmented political structure served them well, allowing multiple independent attempts at solutions rather than requiring universal consensus. Most disturbing of all was their approach to military casualties. Zephyrian forces had been trained to minimize losses because every soldier represented thousands of years of life experience and training. Human forces treated casualties as acceptable costs for achieving tactical objectives. They would sacrifice hundreds of soldiers to destroy a single Zephyrian vessel, viewing the exchange as favorable despite the massive disparity in numbers. "Sir," Krelnox announced, "we have intercepted human communications discussing their long-term strategy. They appear to be planning operations that extend beyond the current conflict." Vexthai reviewed the intercepted messages with growing alarm. Human leaders were discussing post-war scenarios, technological development programs, and expansion plans as if victory was assured. They were treating the Zephyrian invasion not as an existential threat but as a temporary obstacle to be overcome. How can they plan for the future when they are clearly losing this war? Vexthai asked. Perhaps they are not losing, Mordek suggested quietly. Sir, our casualty reports show that human resistance is growing stronger each day despite their losses. They are learning faster than we are adapting. Their technology is improving at exponential rates while ours remains static. Vexthai examined the data more carefully and realized that Mordek was correct. The Empire's technological advantage was shrinking rapidly as humans incorporated captured alien systems into their own designs. More importantly, they were innovating new applications that even Zephyrian engineers had not considered. Their desperate creativity was producing solutions that centuries of careful Zephyrian research had never discovered. The turning point came when human forces successfully captured and interrogated a Zephyrian intelligence officer. Within hours, they had extracted technical specifications for major ship systems and transmitted this information across their global networks. Human scientists began working around the clock to develop countermeasures, treating sleep and rest as luxuries they could not afford. Sir, reported Zarlin, the captured officer was questioned using techniques we have never encountered. The humans extracted information from him in less than 12 hours that would normally require months of careful interrogation. What methods did they use? Extreme psychological pressure combined with rapid-fire questioning and immediate verification of responses. They also used multiple interrogation teams working in shifts to prevent the officer from adapting to any single approach. The techniques appear designed for maximum efficiency rather than prisoner welfare. Vexthai realized that human interrogation methods reflected their broader approach to problem solving. They were willing to accept moral compromises and take risks that long-lived species would never consider. Their brief lifespans made them desperate for rapid results, driving them to develop methods that prioritize speed over safety or ethics. As the fourth week of fighting began, Vexthai was forced to acknowledge that the classification system had failed completely. These humans were not acting like any Class 15 species in recorded history. Their mortality was not a weakness to be exploited but a source of strength that the Empire had never encountered. For the first time in his 3,000-year career, Commander Vexthai began to consider the possibility that his invasion might fail. By the fifth week of the invasion, Commander Vexthai had abandoned all pretense of following standard Class 15 pacification protocols. The humans of Earth had proven immune to conventional conquest strategies, forcing him to escalate to methods typically reserved for Class 12 civilizations or higher. His frustration mounted as each new tactical approach met with increasingly sophisticated resistance. Begin orbital bombardment of population centers, Vexthai ordered grimly. If they will not surrender to preserve their military forces, perhaps they will yield to protect their civilians. The first city to be targeted was London. Plasma beams rained down from orbit, reducing ancient buildings to vapor and creating massive craters where millions of humans had lived. Vexthai watched the destruction with no satisfaction, knowing that such extreme measures represented a failure of proper military doctrine. Destroying civilian populations was supposed to be unnecessary against mortal species, but the human response defied all expectations once again. "Sir," reported Krell-Knox, monitoring global communications, "the humans are not broadcasting surrender signals. Instead, they are using the destruction of London to increase recruitment for their military forces. Their leaders are calling the attack evidence that no negotiation is possible with our forces." Vexthai stared at the communication intercepts in disbelief. Rather than breaking human morale, the civilian casualties had unified their resistance even further. Previously neutral nations were now actively joining the fight against the Zephyrian Empire. The destruction of one city had somehow strengthened rather than weakened their determination. Mordek offered his analysis of this phenomenon. "Commander, I believe we have misunderstood the psychological effects of civilian casualties on mortal species. For beings with such brief lifespans, the death of non-combatants appears to create permanent hostility rather than submission. They cannot view such losses as temporary setbacks because they lack the time for recovery that we take for granted. Then we will destroy more cities until they understand the futility of resistance," Vexthai declared. Over the following days, Zephyrian forces systematically destroyed major population centers across Earth. Beijing, New York, Mumbai, and São Paulo were reduced to radioactive craters. Each attack killed millions of humans and eliminated vast amounts of infrastructure. By all rational measures, the planet's capacity for organized resistance should have collapsed completely. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Human survivors began moving underground on a massive scale, creating hidden networks of tunnels and bunkers that Zephyrian sensors could barely detect. Rather than surrendering, they were transforming their entire civilization into a resistance movement, designed to continue fighting indefinitely. "Sir," reported Zarlin after analyzing orbital reconnaissance data, "the humans have constructed underground facilities beneath virtually every major city we have not yet targeted. These installations appear designed for long-term survival and continued military operations." Vexthai examined the sensor readings with growing alarm. The underground complexes were more sophisticated than anything the Empire had seen from a Class 15 species. They included manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and communication centers, all shielded from orbital detection. The humans had essentially moved their entire civilization underground in a matter of weeks. More disturbing were the reports from captured human prisoners. Under interrogation, they revealed that the underground facilities were not just hiding places but active research centers focused on understanding Zephyrian technology. Human scientists were working around the clock in these bunkers, dissecting every piece of alien equipment they could recover and sharing their discoveries through hardened communication networks, "Sir," announced Mordek after reviewing interrogation transcripts. "The humans have made several technological breakthroughs that our own engineers have not achieved. They are applying their technology in ways that exceed theoretical predictions." "Show me," Vexthai demanded. The science officer displayed recordings from recent human attacks. Crude-looking human spacecraft were now equipped with energy weapons that could penetrate Zephyrian shields. Their guidance systems showed precision that rivaled Imperial technology despite being constructed from salvaged components. Most impressively, they had developed jamming devices that could disrupt Zephyrian communications and sensors. "How did they advance so quickly?" Vexthai asked. "Desperation combined with their unique approach to research," Mordek explained. "While our scientists spend decades testing each modification for safety and efficiency, human researchers are willing to attempt dangerous experiments with minimal preparation. They are making discoveries through trial and error at rates that careful scientific method cannot match." Krell-Knox interrupted with an urgent communication. "Sir, we have lost contact with the patrol ships monitoring the outer system. Their last transmission reported unusual energy signatures approaching from multiple vectors. Within hours, the truth became clear. Human forces had somehow launched a coordinated attack on Zephyrian vessels throughout the solar system, using technology that should not have existed. Ships that had been safely positioned millions of kilometers from Earth were being destroyed by weapons that exceeded Class 15 specifications by orders of magnitude. "Sir," reported the tactical station, "preliminary analysis suggests the humans have developed faster-than-light communication systems and long-range energy weapons. These technologies should be impossible given their starting knowledge base." Vexthai realized that his invasion force was now facing an enemy that no longer qualified as Class 15 by any reasonable measure. In just 5 weeks, humanity had advanced from a primitive mortal species to something approaching Class 11 or 12 capabilities. They had achieved centuries of technological progress in barely a month. The most shocking revelation came from intercepted human military communications. Their leaders were now discussing offensive operations beyond Earth's solar system. They were planning to track retreating Zephyrian forces to their bases and launch counterattacks against Imperial territory. A species that had never traveled beyond their own star system was suddenly contemplating interstellar warfare. "Sir," Krelnox announced nervously, "we are receiving transmission requests from the human military. They appear to be attempting diplomatic contact." "Put them through," Vexthai ordered, curious to hear what the humans might say after weeks of escalating warfare. The communication screen flickered to life, showing a human female in military uniform. Her appearance was unremarkable by Zephyrian standards, short, pale, and obviously fragile compared to Imperial soldiers. But her eyes held an intensity that made Vexthai uncomfortable. "Commander," she said in accented but clear galactic standard, "I am General Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We have successfully reverse-engineered your translation protocols along with most of your other technologies. I am contacting you to discuss terms for your surrender." Vexthai was so shocked that he could not immediately respond. The idea of a Class 15 species demanding Imperial surrender was so absurd that his mind struggled to process the concept. "You are mistaken," he finally replied. "The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender to mortal species." General Chen smiled coldly. "Commander, your fleet has lost 37% of its vessels in the past week. Our technological capabilities now exceed yours in several key areas. Your reinforcements will not arrive for months, but our production capacity doubles every few days. Simple mathematics suggests that continued conflict serves only to delay the inevitable outcome." The communication ended before Vexthai could reply. He sat in stunned silence, realizing that for the first time in Imperial history, a Class 15 species was dictating terms to the Zephyrian Empire. The classification system that had guided galactic expansion for 50,000 years had not just failed, it had become completely meaningless. As damage reports continued to arrive from across the fleet, Vexthai began to understand that his invasion had awakened something far more dangerous than a primitive mortal species. He had encountered humanity at the worst possible moment, when they were desperate enough to attempt anything and advanced enough to make those attempts succeed. The hunters had become the hunted. 1 year after beginning what was supposed to be a routine pacification mission, Commander Vexthai stood in the ruins of his command center preparing evacuation orders. Around him, emergency lights cast harsh shadows across damaged control panels and cracked displays. The mighty Zephyrian invasion fleet that had arrived with such confidence now consisted of fewer than 60 operational vessels, most showing severe battle damage. The transformation of Earth from a Class 15 mortal realm into a galactic superpower had taken exactly 11 months and 13 days. Vexthai would remember those numbers for the rest of his very long life, assuming he survived the next few hours. Human warships were approaching his position with weapons that now surpassed Imperial technology in both power and sophistication. "Sir," reported Krelnox from his damaged communication station, "the humans are broadcasting final surrender demands. They are offering safe passage to the edge of their system in exchange for immediate evacuation." Vexthai studied the tactical display showing Earth's current defensive capabilities. The planet was now surrounded by orbital weapons platforms that could destroy Imperial dreadnoughts with single shots. Human patrol vessels moved through space with a confidence and technological superiority that would have been impossible to imagine 12 months earlier. Most troubling of all, long-range sensors detected massive construction projects throughout the outer system. Humanity was building an interstellar fleet. "Sir," announced Mordek quietly, "I have completed my final analysis of human development rates. The data is quite remarkable. Proceed, Vexthai said, though he suspected he would not enjoy the conclusions. In 12 months, humanity has advanced from Class 15 to approximately Class 9 status. They have developed faster-than-light travel, energy weapons superior to our own, and manufacturing capabilities that exceed Imperial standards. Most significantly, they have done this while simultaneously fighting a war of survival against a technologically superior enemy. Vexthai considered these numbers in the context of Imperial expansion history. The fastest any species had ever advanced through the classification system was the Veltar hegemony, which had required nearly 2,000 years to progress from Class 15 to Class 10. Humanity had achieved greater advancement in a single year. How is this possible? Vexthai asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Their mortality, sir. The very characteristic we classified as a weakness has proven to be their greatest strength. Human researchers work continuously because they know their personal time is limited. They take risks that immortal species would never consider because they have less to lose. Most importantly, they make decisions and implement changes at speeds that our bureaucratic systems cannot match. Zarlin approached with the final casualty reports. Sir, confirmed human losses exceed 2 billion individuals. However, their military capabilities continue to increase despite these casualties. Our losses total 140 ships along with approximately 50,000 personnel. The numbers revealed the true horror of the miscalculation. Humanity had sacrificed more lives in 1 year than the Zephyrian Empire had lost in 50,000 years of expansion. Yet these massive casualties had somehow made them stronger rather than weaker. Each death had driven their technological development forward at an increasingly frantic pace. Sir, Krelnox announced urgently, human vessels are requesting permission to board for final negotiations. They say they wish to escort us safely out of their system. Denied, Vexthai replied immediately. We do not require escort from a mortal species. But even as he spoke, Vexthai realized how hollow his words sounded. The humans were no longer a mortal species in any meaningful sense. They had transcended the limitations that had defined Class 15 civilizations throughout galactic history. In 12 months, they had become something entirely new. A species that combined the desperate intensity of mortality with technological capabilities that rivaled the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. The final humiliation came when human ships began appearing around the fleeing Zephyrian vessels without warning. Their stealth technology now exceeded Imperial sensors, allowing them to appear and disappear at will. The escort was not a request but a statement of fact. Humanity would ensure the invaders left their system whether cooperation was offered or not. Sir, reported the navigation officer, human vessels are transmitting flight path coordinates for our departure. They are also providing detailed star charts showing safe roads back to Imperial territory. Vexthai accepted the coordinates with as much dignity as he could maintain. The star charts were themselves a demonstration of human advancement. They showed knowledge of galactic navigation that should have taken centuries to develop. Somehow, in the process of fighting for survival, humanity had also mastered interstellar cartography. As the last Zephyrian ships limped away from Earth's solar system, Vexthai began composing his final report to Imperial Command. The document would be the most important communication of his career, warning the Empire about a threat unlike anything in their 50,000-year history. Personal log of Commander Vexthai. Final report on Earth pacification mission, he began. The operation has resulted in complete failure and the emergence of a new Class 1 priority threat to Imperial security. He paused, considering how to explain the inexplicable to superiors who had never encountered anything like humanity. The species designated as human has demonstrated capabilities that invalidate our current classification system. In 12 months of combat, they have advanced from Class 15 to approximate Class 9 status, while simultaneously defending against Imperial invasion. Their technological development rate exceeds any previously recorded civilization by orders of magnitude. Vexthai reviewed the data one more time before continuing. Critical finding. Mortality is not a limiting factor for technological development. Human awareness of their brief lifespans creates urgency that drives innovation at rates impossible for immortal species. They view death as inevitable regardless of circumstances, making them willing to accept massive casualties for strategic advantage. This psychological profile makes them immune to traditional conquest methods. The most difficult part of the report was the strategic assessment. Recommendation: immediate reclassification of all class. 15 mortal realms as Class 1 priority threats. Species with lifespans under 200 years should be considered potentially dangerous rather than weak. The brevity of their lives makes them unpredictable and willing to attempt actions that long-lived species would consider irrational. Vex Tai concluded the report with a personal observation that would haunt him for the remainder of his 3,000-year lifespan. We invaded Earth, believing that mortality was humanity's weakness. We have learned that mortality is actually their greatest weapon. They live with the intensity of dying stars, burning bright and fast, consuming everything around them to fuel their growth. Such beings cannot be conquered because they have already accepted the ultimate loss. They fight not to preserve their lives, but to ensure their brief existence has meaning. As the Zephyrian fleet fled toward the edge of the solar system, Vextai watched Earth growing smaller in his displays. The small blue world now bristled with weapons and defensive installations that could threaten any force in the galaxy. More troubling were the massive construction yards visible in orbit around the outer planets. Humanity was building ships designed for interstellar travel and conquest. The invasion of Earth had not conquered a primitive species. Instead, it had awakened a sleeping giant that would soon spread across the galaxy with all the desperate intensity that only mortal beings could possess. The Zephyrian Empire had accidentally created its own worst nightmare, an enemy that viewed death as acceptable and victory as essential. In his final log entry, Vextai wrote the words that would eventually reshape Imperial policy toward mortal species throughout the galaxy. How could you invade a Class 15 mortal realm? You cannot. We mistook the briefness of their lives for weakness, when it was actually the source of strength beyond our comprehension. Note for future reference: never underestimate the power of those who know they are dying. Their mortality makes them the most dangerous force in the universe. The evacuation was complete. The lesson had been learned, and somewhere behind them, humanity was reaching for the stars with hands that knew their time was limited and were determined to make every moment count.